Hi guys, I'm making my video a little late today. It is after the babies have gone down for bed because they decided napping today was not for them. So I was taking care of babies all day. Um, so yeah, I hope you're doing well. I'm trying to get some activities together where you can work together, which I'll talk about that in a second. Um, but yeah, I hope you're doing good. Believe it or not, I miss your faces. I actually really like my classes this year. You guys are really fun. So it's hard not to see you, but hope you're doing well. Hope you're making the best of it. We found out that it's getting extended to April 30th. So, hey, we'll make the best of it. We'll do what we can, hang out virtually with each other. We can do this. We will get through this. We're at the beginning of this. We'll get through the middle. We'll get through the end, and we'll look back and this may be one of the first things you can remember that you will never forget. So, all right. Hopefully, we don't get too interrupted. I'm taping here in my living room. See the baby seats on my husband's drafting table. Okay, so let's get to it. Today, let's see. The goal of today is to first review. You get my little highlighter. Review what we've learned so far about natural selection. Just kind of come all together. And then we have some new content, and I think we want to just explain it a little bit and then give you a chance to apply. And then we'll have an assignment. The assignment is going to be a Google form. The nice thing about the Google form is that you can, what I've changed, someone emailed me and they had a really good suggestion to make the Google form so you can take it multiple times. And I thought, why not? The goal here is learning. And so if you want to continue to take them until you understand it, you can. So I changed yesterday's Lamarck versus Darwin quiz so that you could retake it. So if you didn't like the score that you got, feel free to go back and redo it. And then the like homework quiz, you know how I do those little homework quizzes. The homework quiz for today will be the same way. You can take it multiple times and keep redoing it until you get the score that you want. It will give you the correct answers when you're done. So technically, hopefully you can learn from what you missed, and you can go back and redo it and figure out the ideas. Okay, so review. What have we learned so far about natural selection? Okay, that's what we're going to do first. So if we were in class, this would be my do now. I would ask you the question, hopefully you know this. Why? So Lamarck, let me start with this. Lamarck thought that individual mice, so like this little mouse right here, could change, this little mouse over here could change over time and become a dark mouse. Okay. This is really simple, but see if you can answer this in your own head. Why can't a white mouse evolve? Do 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 do. Go ahead and say it out loud, just so you can force yourself to say something. Do 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 do. Okay, well, of course a white mouse can't evolve because you get your traits from your DNA, and as hard as we try, that little white mouse cannot change his DNA and then change his phenotype. So white mice cannot evolve. Instead, individual mice cannot evolve. We're talking about populations evolving. Okay, so what does that look like? One model that explains how a population evolves is this. Now, we haven't looked at this before, but this is something called a phylogenetic tree. We'll be looking at these more in the future. And this tree is showing that species A, right here on the tree, kind of at the base, changed over time and became species B. So hopefully you guys could explain how species A, that looked like this, could become species B. Okay, so the story should say something like this. In order for a species to change over time, the species must first have variability in the population. So in this species of beetles, we see that there's some brown mice, and then there's this like tan colored mouse, and then there's this red mouse. And the trait of the color of beetles is heritable in that you are expected to look like the phenotype that your parents have. So if you are a brown beetle, your babies will be brown. If you're red, your babies will be red. And the way this population would change over time is you have some sort of selective pressure. Sometimes this is called competition, but something that causes your population to change. So in this case, it's this bird. And the bird really likes to eat these brown ones. Now, why? Well, because the red beetles look like these red ladybugs. They are not red ladybugs. They just look like them. And the red ladybugs do not taste good. They are gross. They would be like the human equivalent of lima beans. Are you like me and you hate lima beans? I hate them with a passion. There's very few foods that I hate, but I hate lima beans. All right, so they don't taste good. So because this beetle was born red, it is avoided by the birds because they think it tastes disgusting. Does it actually taste disgusting? No, it actually tastes like all the other ones. But the bird assumes it tastes bad because it looks like this other species. This is something we call mimicry, when one species mimics the colors of another. All right, so then over time, the bird is going to yum, 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 gobble up all the brown ones, and the only ones that are going to be left to reproduce are going to be the red ones. So the organisms with heritable features that help them survive and reproduce in a particular environment will leave more offspring than their peers. So the red are going to leave more red offspring than their peers. And over time, the population will not only change, it will not only evolve, but it will evolve in such a way that it becomes adapted or better suited for its environment. So these red ones, even though you think, well, maybe they aren't so well suited, because what does red blend with? It actually makes it mimic an organism that is avoided by the bird. So it has an advantage, a reproductive advantage. So that process, which is the process of natural selection that Charles Darwin came up with, explains how the species changed over time. Okay, and that's a review of what you've covered so far. If we look at the species of beetles, we actually find that there is not just red beetles, but there's many different phenotypes of beetles. So how? How can there be all of this diversity in beetles? Well, natural selection explains it all, okay? Because each of their environments are different and have different selective pressures. Maybe it's that you are getting eaten and you mimic an organism that tastes bad. Maybe you blend in. Maybe you have some sort of resistance to disease. So far, we've mainly looked at the selective pressures of the food that you eat or the predators that are around you. But there are other selective pressures, and they follow an acronym of PANDAPAW. This is not something that you'll have to memorize, but it's something that's good to think about and knowing how populations change. So things that can affect, that could give you a reproductive advantage or not, could be the predators that are in your area, like that of the rock pocket mice. Could be the availability of resources, like the Galapagos finches. It could be a nutrient supply. It could be a disease. Hello, coronavirus. So those of us that maybe have a natural, are born with a natural immunity to it, have a reproductive advantage. It could be the accumulation of waste in an area, or it could be things like temperature, CO2 levels, weather conditions, floods, storms. Any of these things could affect the reproductive advantage in a population. Okay, so this is a little bit new, but it just kind of is giving you some words to look at when you're applying natural selection. Okay, so now our new content and the real goal for today is to look at the different types of natural selection. Okay, and this is going to lead us. This would be like the pre-lab for how a new species arises. We're almost there. So most of you, natural selection was a little bit of a review, but this will probably be new and speciation will be new. So this lays the groundwork for you to be able to explain how new species actually arise, which, if you remember, was our initial phenomena. Okay, so before we get to new species arise, we need to get through this idea of the 3 types of natural selection. By the end of today's lesson, you should be able to define the 3 types of natural selection. You should be able to match the type of selection with the type of graph that describes it. So today for our models, instead of using pictures, we're going to use graphs for our models. Okay, so the 3 types of natural selection are directional selection, stabilizing selection, and disruptive selection. That's what we're going to figure out what they mean and what a graph of them looks like. Okay, so before we get too far into it, we first need to be able to describe a population. So what I'd like you to do is we're going to try to describe our class population. And usually in class, I do a reaction time lab, where you have to drop a meter stick and see how long it takes you to grab it. And then we measure our reaction times in comparison to each other's. But I had to be creative. So I thought, since it's baseball season, this would be a fun one to look at. So this one, I'm terrible at this one. So this one's kind of fun. It says, could you hit a 90-mile-per-hour fastball thrown by a major league pitcher? Try this to find out. So apparently on the Los Angeles Dodgers, the best pitcher right now is named Clayton Kershaw. Some of you know about this guy, some of you don't. You want to see if you can hit a fastball thrown by Clayton Kershaw? We'll go to this website. Click right here. Okay, and hopefully this works on your computer. What you do is it says, let's try a little experiment to see if you're quick enough to hit a fastball. A 90-mile-per-hour fastball takes about a half a second to reach home. 1/2 a second. That's crazy. Normal human reaction time is about 2 seconds. So a normal human cannot hit a major league fastball. Can you? So click continue. First, we'll show you a screen with a pitcher. Get ready. As soon as you see swing batter, click on your screen as fast as you can. You can start this activity by clicking the baseball on the left. So click play ball, and as soon as you see the swing batter, you click your screen, and I couldn't do it. So you can play ball again. What? That was as quick as I can go. So try that out. See if you have the reaction time that allows you to hit a fastball. Okay, so that one's just for fun. So go ahead and try that out now. Click pause in my video and play around with it, especially you baseball players and softball players. Okay, so pause me. You played it. Okay, so the next human reaction time, because we're looking for variation in our species, will actually give you a reaction time in seconds. And this is one that you're going to go to this website. You are going to test your reaction time 5 times, get your average, and then you're going to click here on this form and share your average. Okay, so let's go to this website. All right, it says click the large button, so click here to start. Wait for the stoplight to turn green. When the stoplight turns green, click the large button quickly. Click the large button again to continue. So it's pretty simple. Click here on green light. Boom. Ooh, that was fast. But I'm faster than you guys, right? So click here to continue. When the light goes from red to green, I click here. Oh, well, that one didn't count because I was showing you guys. All right, so you're going to do that 5 times, and then we'll give you your average, and you're going to take that average and copy and paste it into this form. And then we're going to see what our variation is for human reaction time for you guys. Okay, so when I normally do this in class, instead of putting it into a Google form, you put it into on a Post-it note, and we make a histogram. The way you make a histogram is number of individuals goes on the left, and then the reaction times go here on the right. And then if your reaction time was 40, you write your name on it, and then anybody who has a reaction time of 40 puts their Post-it note here. Okay, and this is what our graph looks like. So we would have done reaction time, so we'll have to see what that looks like tomorrow. The other thing we do is height. Okay, and you would just find your height, and then you'd write your height with your name on a Post-it note, and then you would place your Post-it note on another axis, which is a histogram, which is number of individuals and your height in centimeters. Okay, and what you would notice probably is that our reaction time would have had a graph that looked pretty similar to this, and our height would have had a graph that looks pretty similar to this. So how could we describe this graph? Well, if I look at this, I can see that there are most of the individuals fall in this middle area here. Whoops, I think I'm moving this. And very few fall in these areas. And if I can draw a line, if I were to draw a line, it would kind of be like, it would kind of look like this. In fact, if you're taking a math class, we would call this a bell curve. This is what a normal population looks like. When you look at most traits, it follows a bell curve, meaning that there's very few individuals in our class that are really short. There's very few that are really tall, and most fall in this average range, just like the height of these. Very few that are very short, very few that are very tall, and most of them would fall in this like somewhat middle range. So that's what normal variation in a population looks like. Okay. So what we're going to ask for our normal variation that we can see for any population, we're going to assume that for any trait, we're going to assume that there's variation and that it follows this bell curve. There's very few of the extremes and most fall in an average. So in the classroom, another thing we look at is hair color. And what we find is there's very few real light, there's very few real dark, and usually in the classroom, most people fall in this middle range of like blonde, brown hair. Okay, almost any trait follows like that. A reaction time, we'll see tomorrow if it follows that. So after we know that this is what a normal population looks like, what we're going to ask is which traits, which variations in that population are most fit. Okay, so fit, when I think of fit in our everyday language, that means like you work out and you have a high fitness in your ability to like run or jump or lift. That is not what it means in biology. In biology, fitness is the measure of the ability of an organism to survive and reproduce. It's really a measure of reproductive advantage. Officially, it's defined as the number of offspring that organisms leave. So what we're going to ask in each one of the populations is which variations of the trait are most fit. Okay, so in our first one, our first type of selection is directional selection. Okay, and here you see our original population follows a bell curve. Okay, and if you look at what the variables are in our bell curve, we have beetle color spectrum. Oops, let me move my mouse a little bit here so I can move a little better. Okay, so we have light green beetles, and then medium green beetles, and then dark green beetles. So this is our spectrum of beetle color. Okay, over here is the number of beetles. So this is very similar to our height and our reaction time. This is a histogram, and they've just drawn a line to represent the organisms. Okay, the original population of beetles is the dotted line. And then after natural selection has occurred in this particular environment, they remeasured the individuals and the line looked like this. So natural selection is occurring, the population is changing. Specifically, what's changing here is you can see there are less of these individuals. In fact, there's none of the real light colors. And if I look at my original population where the darker colors are, there's a lot more of them. So in directional selection, one extreme phenotype is more fit than all the others. For example, if a beetle population moves into a new environment with dark soil and dark vegetation, the dark beetles might be hidden better and survive better than both the medium and the light. So the directional selection shifts the curve towards the favorable phenotype. This one's pretty easy for you guys to wrap your heads around, I think, because this is what happened with our pocket mice. We would have had the light pocket mice down here, the medium colored pocket mice here, and the dark colored pocket mice here. And in location B, the population shifted directionally to the darker phenotype. So in this case, who is the most fit? One of the extremes, if we're looking at the beetles, it's the extreme of the darker color. The darker color has the reproductive advantage. Another word to say that is the darker color is more fit. Okay, let's go on to the next type. Stabilizing selection. Okay, again, if you look at our X and Y axis, the variables being looked at here is on the X-axis, you see beetle color spectrum. You see the light beetles, the medium colored beetles, and the dark beetles. And on your Y-axis, you see number of beetles. This is a histogram that has a line drawn to represent the data. And what you see here is, again, the dotted line represents our original population. But what you see here is there's less of both extremes, and there's more of the intermediate. So in stabilizing selection, the intermediate phenotypes are more fit than the extreme. For example, maybe the medium green beetles might be best camouflaged and thus survive best on the forest floor covered by medium green plants. So stabilizing selection narrows the curve. So you went from having a bell that looks like this to a much taller bell. So who is more fit? In this case, the intermediate has the reproductive advantage, and both extremes are selected against. Okay, now the final type is disruptive selection. This one's got an interesting curve in the after selection. So you see our initial bell curve. We still have our light, medium, and green color spectrum on the x-axis, and the variable on our y-axis is the number of beetles. In disruptive selection, both of the extremes are more fit than the middle trait. So if you look here, the light colored beetle increases in number, the dark beetle increases in number, but the intermediate decreases in number. So an example of this is if the beetles move into an environment with patches of light green moss and dark green shrubs, both light and dark beetles might be better hidden and survive better than the medium green. This diversifying selection makes up multiple peaks in the curve. So if you have two peaks in your final curve, it's disruptive selection. Okay, so now what you guys should do is hopefully you've now figured out the three types of selection. You figured out directional, which selects for one of the extremes, stabilizing, which selects for the intermediate and narrows the curve, and disruptive, which disrupts the bell altogether and selects for two different extremes at the same time. What you guys should do now is you should go on to the classroom, click on the types of selection form, and you should answer the questions. So the first question on here has you look at graphs of three different types of selection, and it asks you what the variables are in the graph. Remember, the variables in a graph are what is on the x and the y axis. If you go to the next one, it's looking specifically at stabilizing, and it's asking which of the population has experienced selection different from the original population. So how is your original different from your after selection population? All of the rest are at giving you a population example. So let's look at this one with the starlings. So this is a starling and this is a starling clutch. It says determine the type of selection. So you're just going to select directional, stabilizing, or disruptive. So let's do this one together. Starlings produce an average of 5 eggs in each clutch. If there are more than 5, parents cannot adequately feed their young. So you can't feed your young if you have more than 5. You're not selected for. You have less fitness. If there are fewer than 5, predators may destroy the entire clutch. So if you have less than 5, you are less fit. As a result, 5 eggs becomes the most common clutch size. Which type of selection is this? Well, what we see is both extremes. The less than 5 and the more than 5 are selected against. So this would be stabilizing selection. Okay, your objective here is to complete this Google form. If you don't like the score that you get, you are welcome to redo it and try for a better score. Okay, this sets us up for understanding speciation. So for speciation, I have a lab where you can work in pairs with any other student in my biology classes. So if you have a student in any one of my hours that you would like to work with, send them a text or Snapchat. I guess you guys probably Snapchat and see if they want to work together. What you'll need is a partner. If you can get one, you can do it on your own if you prefer to, and you'll need a dice. So someone will need to roll the dice. If you don't have a dice, there's online dice that you can use as well. So see if you can get a partner, because then you can do a Google Meet and you can see each other's faces and you can hang out and do the lab together. So for the next thing, you'll be working together and you'll figure out how a new species is formed. Okay, good luck on the assignment. I hope this makes sense. And I hope you're enjoying your day and have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow.